Hey, what's up everybody, this is Muth24, and today I'm going to take a look at the Amazing Spider-Man Spider Island crossover event. This was from a couple years ago, and it is a decently thick crossover event, about the same thickness as my Age of Ultron collection. And this collects, if I look at the back here, Amazing Spider-Man's number 666 through 673, Amazing Spider-Man Infested, Spider Island Deadly Foes, and Venom 6 through 9. The main reason that I got this was for the Venom tie-ins, and the whole story, I kind of knew the basics about Spider Island, that it's basically everyone in Manhattan, well not everyone, but a decent number of the Manhattan populace is infected with this basically spider virus thing that gives them Spider-Man powers, and eventually they'll mutate into weirder giant spider alien creature thingies that just look grotesque and nasty. But basically the whole premise of it is that a bunch of people get spider powers, and Spider-Man and a bunch of the Marvel superheroes have to deal with it. So the whole problem of people turning into Spider-Man, basically, a weaker version of Spider-Man, obviously, but basically getting Spider-Man's powers, is brought on by the Jackal. And the Jackal is a character who hasn't done a lot, to my knowledge, in the Spider-Man stuff recently. He was kind of there for a bit in the 80s and I think in the 90s, as he kind of pop up from time to time and do the mad scientist routine, and that was about it. Doesn't seem like a whole lot's changed, because that's basically his whole shtick, is that he's just doing this for science, just to see what happens, sort of a thing. And they kind of explain later on that he had other motives for research and stuff like that, but it's mainly he's just infecting people with this spider virus thing for giggles, mainly, which isn't the best motivation for me to appreciate him as a villain. And that's one of the things that I think is really weird about this collection, is that because it's Spider-Man first and foremost. Like, there's other heroes that show up. Wolverine shows up, a bunch of the X-Men show up, the Fantastic Four show up, Captain America, etc. But this is a Spider-Man event first and foremost. And to show this huge part of the Manhattan populace being infected with the spider virus thingy, they only show a couple supervillains, and only one of which actually gets infected with the spider virus itself. That's Shocker. And when he does get infected, it's really cool for like a reminder of, oh wow, this is not just affecting, you know, good innocent people, it's also affecting Spider-Man's enemies as well. And you do get to see Shocker mutate into this six-armed version of himself. It's kind of a throwback to the 90s, I believe it's the 90s comics run, maybe it's the late 80s, where there was a Spider-Man with 6 arms there. So it's got a little throwback to, or maybe it's 8 arms, I don't remember. Throwback to that sort of a image there, and sort of Shocker freaking out, not knowing what to do. But Shocker is the most impressive villain, I would say, of this lot. Like, I don't really consider Anti-Venom to be a villain. He's in this as well. Kane's more an anti-hero in this storyline. I guess of the classic Spider-Man characters, the previously established Spider-Man characters who were decently important in previous storylines and all that, he's the most impressive, which, in my opinion, Shocker's just kind of okay. Like, he's a B-list Spider-Man villain, and that's fine, but he's only so exciting when you compare him to the likes of, you know, the old-school Venom and Carnage and Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and Mysterio and so on and so forth. There's a lot of really good Spider-Man villains, which I think is one of the things that I love about the Spider-Man storyline. Batman's the same way. Like, Batman is a cool character, but he's better defined by how many great villains he has in his gallery, if you will. So it's sort of the same thing here with Spider-Man. Like, there's so many great villains that define his story. And for Spider Island, they picked all the dumb, boring ones. Like, that's my problem with it. Is Shocker is the coolest one, but he only shows up very briefly. Hydro Man's in it, which Hydro Man is just a really lame spin-off of Sandman. Like, oh, we did Sandman, let's do it with water. Like, no, you didn't need to. There's no point to that, other than make a dumb Mudman combination at one point. So Hydro Man, again, shows up for 5 seconds, does literally nothing important to the story. So at least Shocker did something, kind of, in the grand scheme of things. And then Jackal's just not interesting. Like, there's nothing about him that's even remotely makes me want to hate him. Like, I like comic books when they make me love to hate the villain. Age of Ultron did that brilliantly, because like, oh, Ultron, you're so smart in the way that you took over the world and everything, and you had like a backup plan for almost everything. Like the older Infinity Gauntlet stuff made me love to hate Thanos because he's such a bad guy. And obviously those are much larger scale villains that we're dealing with, just because of how big their plans are, how broad their schemes are. But even here, when you're like trying to infect a whole section of New York, it's just, you're just doing it for your own personal interest. Okay, I guess that's not really a great motive, but whatever. The cover art here is a little misleading because Black Panther doesn't really show up in the comic. Luke Cage is there briefly. I don't believe Hulk is in it. Red Hulk's in it, but not Bruce Banner Hulk. Iron Fist, Captain America, Thing, Spider-Woman, and Cloak. I will also believe Dagger's in there too. They are all in it. I forget this guy's name, but he's like a martial arts teacher for Peter. And obviously they're all wearing different versions of the Spider-Man costume from over the years for the sake of getting across the idea that there are so many people infected with the Spider-Virus. But they explain in the comic that like superheroes and mutants are immune to it. So none of the X-Men are going to get infected with it. None of the pre-existing superheroes are going to get infected with it. But obviously some of Peter's friends and some of the people that he knows do get infected with it, like Mary Jane does. On the back here we have the Statue of Liberty with the Spider-Man mask painted on it. And just to kind of give you a look at some of the artwork here, here we have the first page with the Spider Island title card there. A bunch of the weird bugs, arachnids rather, running around the city. There's a few different art styles that are tinkered with here in the beginning. We got some more exaggerated, highly colorful, sort of like, I don't know, heavy on the sketches there for the black in between the fire, or the flames of the fire there. The whole infested prologue bit is really fast paced, and there's a lot of dialogue going on, and it's kind of annoying how much dialogue takes up some of the pages here. Like, let me find a good page to show an example for that. Once the action gets going, it's not nearly as bad, but there's a few introductory sections where there's like dialogue all over the page, and it's like, okay guys, need to calm down a little bit. I'm failing to find a good example of it here, but I'm kind of just flipping back and forth. Anyways, we do have this art style that reminds me a lot more of the Ultimate Spider-Man comics and kind of how things were in the early 2000s, more so than the more recent stuff. And this might have been around the time they were like sort of shifting into the current art style. I know Spider-Man, out of all the Marvel heroes, kind of held on to that early 2000s art style more tightly than some of the other characters have. And maybe that's because it's generally aimed at a younger audience. But you can see here that like they do incorporate a little bit more realism in like the characters' designs and some of the issues here, like the muscle definition there, the way that he's swinging through the city. But then you have stuff here where it's certainly more cartoony and silly, where you have characters with almost like square fingertips and expressions that are just kind of wonky looking. It's not an art style that I'm a real big fan of, nor have I ever really been a big fan of. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man was interesting at its time, the time that it came out, because it was, I guess, a more gritty reimagining of the Spider-Man story. And the whole rule of dead is dead in the Ultimates universe is cool for the sake of the stakes are higher there. But I've never really been a big fan of the art style for that. Also, one thing that drives me nuts with this story is how much we see of Peter Parker versus how much we see of Spider-Man. Now, obviously, with everyone else having spider powers, Peter can just kind of play it off as, oh, I don't actually need to wear my costume because I can just, pretend that I got infected with the same virus that everyone else did. But they spend too much time talking about Peter Parker's current relationship with his girlfriend, I believe her name's Carly, who I don't know how she factored into the main Spider-Man storyline, because I haven't read a proper Spider-Man story in a long, long time, because all the current storylines they've been running with Dr. Octavius taking over his brain and the whole one more day thing all sound really stupid to me, if I'm being frank. And so I've not had that much interest in reading some of the core Spider-Man storylines, just the stuff where it ties into other characters crossing over into other storylines and all that. I don't know how she plays out in the other Spider-Man stuff, but in this, his girlfriend is really boring and uninteresting. And the fact that they spend so much time talking about her and Peter's relationship with her versus how much time you actually see Spider-Man do stuff and be cool and be a superhero and all that is incredibly lopsided. And that's unfortunate, because I'd rather see Spider-Man dealing with the problem that he's been dealt and being a superhero and doing all that stuff. I don't care about his whiny relationships. I don't care about his teenage hormones and all that. It's boring. Like, I read that plenty of times. I don't need to do it again. So I wish they would have cut some of that filler content out and dealt with the main story more, because I feel like when we get down to the nitty-gritty of it, we have Anti-Venom, the Fantastic Four, Venom, and a couple of the X-Men doing more to handle the Spider Island outbreak than Spider-Man himself. Like, at the end of the day, yes, he's the main hero who stops the whole situation from escalating any further, but and kind of puts things back the way that they were. But the only reason that they properly finish things off, and I won't really spoil what happens, but is a combined effort on the part of everyone else. And that's kind of unfortunate that you make this whole Spider-Man event, and then Spider-Man really doesn't do nearly as much as you would expect him to do to rectify the problem. But as for the Venom storyline, I think it's really well done in this, because he does go toe-to-toe with Anti-Venom here, and there's this whole sort of like savior complex that Eddie Brock has developed as Anti-Venom, and they do some, I don't know if they're deliberate or not, but they do some parallels where, like, Anti-Venom is in a church healing people of their illnesses and their pains and all that, and he casts Venom out like Jesus throwing sinners out of a temple. It's kind of funny because of how ridiculous it is. But like I said, I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but I got a kick out of it. And then later on we have the most patriotic team-up ever, which is Captain America and Venom fighting on the same side against some of the higher-ups in the whole infestation, the whole like plague taking over the island there and turning people into spiders. Because it's not just Jackal; he's got some subordinates and all that. But it's like he planted the seeds, and then some other people kind of jumped in and took hold of that. There is some bonus content in the back here once the main storyline is finished, and the storyline actually ends with a lead into the next Venom thing, which I think is great, because I'd rather they end on a bit of a high note there. Because the Venom stories are really well done in this. But we have a little spotlight thing here in the back. And they're kind of talking about the Spider Island tie-in stuff. A whole new... a focus on the writers who kind of came up with the idea for Spider Island and new stuff for the storyline and the characters and all that. I find it very interesting here that they have a little quote here about a tagline. It should be, it ain't Shakespeare, shut up and have fun. Fair enough, but when your story's dumb and focuses on all the wrong things, you might want to rethink that strategy. So it's a lot of interviews here and sort of focusing on the different writers and all that, which I do appreciate the work they've done on Spider-Man, and obviously there's a lot of time that goes into creating the stories and doing the artwork and all that. And I don't deny that there's a lot of skill at work here. I just don't think that his hits on all cylinders enough for it to be considered really a good Spider-Man event or a good Marvel event. To be honest, like, it's just not great. And the main reason I bought this, like I said, was for the Venom tie-in. And for that reason, like, I enjoy the Venom tie-in stuff. Like, that's all fine and dandy. But for the sake of this being a Spider-Man event, which it is first and foremost, it's really stupid. Like, it's got a few really good points, and when it hits on all cylinders, it's hitting really well, but it's so few and far between, and those come in so late in the game. Like, even the Madam Web stuff that they're talking about, where the Threads of Destiny and all that is not handled nearly as well as it was in even, like, the 90s cartoon, and you know, stuff like the old comics where, yeah, it was cheesy, but at least it was consistent. With this, it's just like, oh, we're throwing the rules out the window just for the sake of it. I don't know, catching readers off guard or something. But you have a lot of characters that just show up for the sake of throwing their name in there. A lot of X-Men have that happen. There's a few more consistent characters like Captain America and Wolverine and all that. But if you're looking for something that's going to be a real lasting impact on your perception of Spider-Man, or just as a crossover event in general, I really can't highly recommend this one. It's just not very well written, and it's not that exciting. There's not a whole lot going for it. So, unfortunately, that's my review of Spider Island, and with that, I will see you guys next time.